Have you ever tried and failed to read Marcel Proust's epic, sprawling In Search of Lost Time? Or perhaps you haven't even tried, you haven't even attempted to read the book because its size is so daunting. Do you love comic books? Do you love manga? Do you like graphic novels? If the answer is yes to any of those questions, then you may just love the graphic novel version of Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time. This beautiful volume just turned up today, and I am so excited to have a first look at it with you today. Before we dive in, I thought it might be pertinent to briefly tell you my thoughts about comics and graphic novels, and I must say I was a little bit apprehensive about this. I wasn't expecting to be particularly moved or impressed by it. As you may or may not know, we are currently doing a deep reading over the long term of Proust's masterpiece in the Hardcore Literature Book Club. I love In Search of Lost Time. It is up there with Anna Karenina, Moby Dick and Don Quixote, and also Clarissa as one of my personal favourite novels of all time. So how on earth can one do that novel justice in any other form? But at the same time, I do often like to think, well, what would Anna Karenina look like if it was an opera? For example, what would Don Quixote look like if it were a play? And now we have the answer to the question, what would Proust's In Search of Lost Time look like as a graphic novel? I have always been a huge fan of graphic novels. Just because I'm a proponent for deep reading the great books and relishing great literature doesn't mean I don't cherish masterpieces in the graphic novel form. A couple of years back, I spent a long time reading only comics, and when I lived in Japan, I used manga, a beautiful art form with quite a deep history behind it. I used manga to teach myself Japanese. If you're interested in seeing a video showing off my favourite volumes of manga, then do let me know. So I definitely don't have a problem with graphic novels or comics. I love them. I love the visual medium. I suppose the apprehension comes from the adaptation. Whenever a movie is made of our favourite book, we always go into it with a little bit of apprehension. Is the character going to look the same way as they did in my mind? Is it going to be a faithful adaptation? Is it going to leave some really key bits out? How can it live up to this book? We always ask these questions, don't we? But I was very pleasantly surprised with this beautiful hardback graphic novelisation of Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time. Now we'll talk about its shortcomings, but before we do, let's talk about the positives. And the fact of the matter is, I give this 5 stars. The illustrations are gorgeous and reveal a deep love on behalf of the artist for Proust's story. This is a love letter to Proust, and I believe, though they are selling it as a book, as a remedy for those who couldn't get through Proust's masterpiece, I would say that this is best served as a companion to those who have already read the book. Yes, this is much easier to get your bearings, to know what's going on, to know the characters, and it is much quicker to consume. There's many passages rendered here in 1 or 2 frames, which would take 100 pages to get through in the original. When I first opened it up and saw this beautiful illustrated version of Proust's Paris, I was absolutely blown away by the detail and the delicacy of the lines and the colours. And when you first open it, you're treated to this beautiful image of a magic lantern. The wonderful thing about this is you can understand what is going on in the novel itself much quicker and much more easily. For example, in the opening to Combray, we're told about Geneviève de Bourbon and Golo, and we're told about magic lanterns, but you kind of need to do some digging into the history of pre-cinema to understand what exactly a magic lantern is. We spent a good chunk of time, well over half an hour, looking into the history of magic lanterns, these beautiful slideshows that would tell a story in the time of Marcel Proust's childhood. We did that in the book club, but here you're served up imagery of the folk tale and the magic lantern itself, and it's done beautifully, gorgeously, with great care and attention to detail. Another thing that I really love about this book is just how the characters have been depicted. If you turn to the back of the volume, you get a beautiful illustrated who's who of the characters in this wonderful long prose poem. I was pleased to see many of my personal favourite quotes did make it into the graphic novel, like this one here: "Our social personalities are the creation of other people's minds. We invest the physical appearance of the person we see with all the notions we have formed about him." Now, this is also somewhat of a new translation. I don't believe they're using the Moncrief Kilmartin Enright, which is my personal favourite version of Proust. And it is wonderful that they are still serving up a platter of Proust's best sentences. However, to get to this particular quote and quotes like it, you have to wade through many, many pages. You have to take your time, you have to reread, you have to read aloud, you have to think and meditate and mull over the meanings of different situations, different characters, and the lens through which these characters are viewed, i.e. the lens of our narrator, and how that lens distorts and is refracted and changes over time. To be given insights straight off the bat near the beginning of this graphic novel with only the scenes, with only the visualization, without all the interiority, is a shame. Now, this doesn't detract from the work as a love letter to Proust itself. It doesn't detract from a beautiful piece of art in and of its own right. I'm just saying, the effect you get from reading the story in a graphic novel form is vastly different from the effect you get if you read the book. Proust dilates time. Here in the graphic novel, things move at a much quicker pace. We can see, by virtue of a few specific famous scenes, that the story itself, the way it is told, is not best served by graphic novel form. A very famous scene in Proust, and one you may know even if you haven't read In Search of Lost Time, is the Madeleine scene. Here, it takes about a page or two. Look, a Madeleine. Yes, Nicholas went to the patisserie. And away he goes down memory lane. But to read this in the novel has a vastly different effect upon you. But then again, this is very much balanced out by how gorgeous the illustrations are. Full colour, beautifully rendered, and I think they did a great job in depicting the characters, at least how I saw them. I love that some of my favourite parts of the novel are definitely represented. For example, Marcel describing Giotto's figures. It's here. I must say that I couldn't help flicking to some of my favourite parts of Proust's first volume, for example, the romance between little Marcel and Gilbert, and I thought this was rendered beautifully. Now, I don't know, because I didn't look at the comic, I didn't read the graphic novel version first, so I don't know what effect emotionally it might have had, but when I read the novel, this became a particular favourite series of scenes for me. When I read this in Proust's original, this really did sweep me up with a sense of nostalgia. Now, I don't know if it would have been the same if I had read the graphic novelisation version first, but it is nice to see your favourite scene depicted. What I might say is that I believe this graphic novel is good for two people, and by the way, if you do like it, there is a volume 2, which I have already ordered, having seen the aesthetic splendour of this volume. But this graphic novel is best for two people, I think. You either have already read some or all of Proust, and you are a fan of him, and now you just want to go back down memory lane and have a bit of a reread and think about some of your favourite scenes and see them visually depicted in gorgeous illustration. If that's you, if you are already reading Proust, then you would probably like this. I know I did. I think they've done a great job here. You can tell that the illustrator, Stéphane Hoyer, whose last name I'm sorry for most likely butchering, but his illustrations belie a deep love of Proust, and so does the translation, Arthur Goldhammer. Now, I'm always going to prefer the Kilmartin Moncrief Enright translation. I've got the Lydia Davis as well, and I think the project that Prendergast and team undertook with that series is applaudable, and they did a great job, but my personal favourite has to still be the Moncrief. But this is still an okay translation, especially when a narrative that dilates time has to be compressed into single panels or a series of panels. The graphic novel form is a lot quicker in pacing, which is an interesting problem to have when you're translating and adapting Proust, whose pace is like a snail. This graphic novel is also good for those who have struggled to get into Proust. If you've picked up Proust and you struggle to get through the first 100 or 200 pages, firstly, you're definitely not alone. Readers in the Hardcore Literature Book Club are divided. Some absolutely love Proust and are swept away by him. Some find him boring and difficult to visualise, and they find the pace to be mind-numbingly slow. The problem here is that the opening, which is Combray, which takes some time to get through, is somewhat of an overture to the rest of the novel. I've seen many people recommend skipping the section altogether and going straight to the good stuff. The second volume is the good stuff. I absolutely love it. The problem is, the overture, Combray, is difficult up until you get to the rest of the novel. But once you've read the rest of the novel, you can quite easily go back to that section and really appreciate it and relish it and cherish it. So it's a bit of a catch-22. I'd say personally, skip it if you like, and many famous readers of Proust, many writers and artists have done so, especially when it was coming out in real time. Some people chose to just pick up volume 2 or volume 3 because they couldn't find the first volume. You can do that. My advice would be to take it slow, pivot into the pace, embrace it, and really relish it and slow down and read it aloud or listen to it read aloud. We do all of this in the book club. We're doing a very deep, slow, scriptural reading. It's like a biblical exegesis, but with Proust. I'm reading each and every page, and then we unpick it, and then we look at what the meaning is and all that. It's a good chat. But for those who really cannot abide the opening to Proust, and there is absolutely no shame in that, it is difficult. And when I first read Proust, I was very young and I was too young, and I didn't have the lived experience, and I hadn't learnt the patience to put up with Proust, let alone get anything from it. If that's you and you find Proust difficult, then this would be a great companion, and it may very well help unlock the text. Just having visualizations and depictions of the characters alone is a tremendous gift. But anywho, so that's my little first look, my little review of this wonderful volume. I'm off now to go flick through it and read Proust himself. And let me know what you think of Proust. What do you think about the idea of adapting him into a graphic novel? I know that much of his stuff has been adapted for film and many people have been unimpressed. Do you think this could work? Are you intrigued? Will you check it out yourself? And let us know if you've seen an adaptation of this kind done well. There are many instances of great literature being adapted into comics and graphic novels, and indeed for many other mediums like the stage and the screen. And if you've enjoyed this video, then please give a thumbs up and subscribe, because it tells me to keep making more. Have a lovely day and happy Prousting.